Galactic Empire arrested a human prisoner until they learned his call sign. The Imperial dreadnought Veil Zorith drifted through the void, its colossal silhouette blotting out distant stars. Aboard the command deck, Inquisitor Xiron examined the report in his hands. A human had been captured on the fringes of Empire-controlled space, and initial scans indicated he was alone. Unarmed. Defenseless. Xiron scoffed. Another primitive ape stumbling into restricted space, he muttered. The chamber doors hissed open, and 2 sentries entered, dragging the human prisoner between them. He was bound at the wrists, clad in a torn combat suit, his boots leaving smudges of dried blood on the pristine floor. Yet, despite his restraints, he walked upright. His posture was relaxed. Too relaxed. Xiron studied the man. The prisoner met his gaze without flinching. Cold, calculating eyes. You are aboard an Imperial vessel, human. Your kind trespasses where it does not belong, Xiron said, stepping closer. Your best course of action is immediate cooperation. The human remained silent. Xiron gestured, and a guard struck the prisoner's ribs with the butt of his rifle. The impact echoed, but the human barely reacted. Your name, Xiron demanded. The prisoner exhaled, as if considering whether it was even worth responding. Finally, his lips parted. You have no idea what you've done. Xiron's brow furrowed. He had interrogated countless prisoners. Mercenaries, insurgents, even warlords. But none had spoken with such certainty. A data technician approached. Inquisitor, we've decrypted part of his record. It was highly classified. Much of it is redacted, but we retrieved a call sign. Xiron turned sharply. What is it? The technician hesitated, then swallowed. Revenant. The room fell into an unnatural silence. Xiron's fingers twitched. He had heard the name before. A ghost whispered through the ranks of war councils. A specter in classified reports. Fleets lost without distress calls. High-value targets eliminated in impossible circumstances. Entire operations dismantled overnight. An elite assassin. Phantom. A nightmare. And he was human. A guard shifted uncomfortably. It's just a name. Probably exaggerated myths. The technician spoke, voice tight. With respect, sir, we found no official records of any confirmed kills attributed to Revenant. No bodies. No proof. Just disappearance. Xiron turned back to the prisoner. You let yourself be captured. Revenant smiled. Took you long enough. Xiron's pulse quickened. He snapped to his officers. Maximum security. Full containment protocols. Now. Alarms blared through the dreadnought as soldiers moved into formation. The prisoner was escorted, paraded, through cold metallic corridors, flanked by a dozen armored sentries. Soldiers whispered as he passed. The fear in their voices was unmistakable. Revenant? Here. That can't be real, he's just a story. They say he took down an entire battalion alone. The interrogation chamber was a sterile, high-tech void. Xiron stood before the prisoner, studying him like a specimen. You're an operative of the Terran military. Silence. How many of you are there? Silence. Xiron clenched his jaw. Your species is overconfident. Your forces are scattered. Your influence is minimal at best. The Empire has conquered thousands of worlds. Humanity is nothing but an inconvenience. The prisoner leaned forward. Then why are your hands shaking? Xiron stiffened. He hadn't realized. The lights flickered. A minor power fluctuation. Normal in a ship this size. Yet, a whisper of unease curled around Xiron's thoughts. You will tell us everything, Xiron said, stepping back. Or we will extract it. Revenant tilted his head slightly, as if weighing the idea. Then, in a voice devoid of emotion, he said, You should be more concerned with what happens if I don't tell you anything. Xiron exhaled sharply. This was absurd. The prisoner was alone, unarmed, surrounded by one of the most powerful war machines in the Empire. He shouldn't be a threat, but every instinct screamed otherwise. The technician returned, pale-faced. Sir, I ran deeper scans on the human. His vitals are wrong. Zyron frowned. Define wronged. Heart rate, steady. Too steady. Stress response, minimal. Almost non-existent. Brain activity, off the charts. But it's controlled. He's not reacting like a normal prisoner. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Zyron turned back to Revenant, his voice lower now. What are you? The prisoner exhaled slowly, deliberately. Problematic. A security officer barged in. Sir, urgent transmission from Imperial High Command. Zyron snapped toward him. Put it through. The display screen flickered, revealing the imposing figure of the Imperial Grand Strategist. His voice was sharp, urgent. Inquisitor Zyron, confirm the prisoner's identity immediately. Zyron straightened. Confirmed. He's human. Call sign, Revenant. Silence. The strategist's already severe expression darkened. You need to understand the magnitude of your mistake, the strategist said, his voice like grinding stone. You captured him. That is an act of war. Zyron's breath caught. You will not interrogate him. You will not attempt to extract information. You will not provoke him further. Zyron forced his voice to remain steady. Sir, he's one man. The strategist's eyes narrowed. Do you think the Terrans let him be captured? A cold realization settled in Zyron's stomach. This wasn't a capture, the strategist continued. It was a deployment. The dreadnought's power flickered again. This time, the backup generators failed to engage. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in crimson. The technician's console sparked violently. His voice wavered. Sir, ship-wide systems are being overridden. Zyron turned sharply. By who? The technician swallowed, his trembling fingers working frantically over the console. Not who. What? The screen filled with cascading code, Terran military encryption, and a single line of text. Engaging protocol. Revenant. Zyron's blood ran cold. He turned to where the prisoner had been restrained. The chair was empty. A guard's strangled gasp cut through the room. Zyron barely had time to react before the lights died completely. The last thing he heard was the sound of a single, quiet breath. Then the screaming began. Darkness swallowed the dreadnought. The emergency lights failed to engage, leaving only the red glow of failing security monitors flickering in panic. The bridge crackled with static-laced transmissions. Officers shouting, systems failing, orders being barked but never answered. Zyron gripped the console, eyes scanning the chaos. I want every squad deployed. Lock this ship down. His voice was sharp, but it did nothing to slow the unraveling. Sir, internal defenses have been compromised, a technician stammered. Every security lock overridden. The realization hit like a physical blow. This wasn't just an escape. This was a takeover. A dull thud echoed through the halls, distant but distinct. Then another, a rapid succession of sharp, muffled sounds. Gunfire. Zyron slammed his communicator. Report. The response came through static, broken, and panicked. Yes, sir, Section C12. We're under ATA. A gurgling noise, a brief scream, and then silence. The transmission cut out. Zyron clenched his jaw. How is he moving so fast? A squad of elite soldiers had been stationed at C12. They were gone in under a minute. Another comm channel crackled. Sir, multiple personnel down, bodies found, but no sign of the target. He's not using standard routes. It's like he's inside the walls. Zyron felt his pulse spike. That was impossible. No single human could navigate a dreadnought's ventilation systems this fast. But Revenant wasn't just any human. Seal off every access point, Zyron ordered. Flood the lower decks with nerve gas if you have to. A weapons officer hesitated. Sir, that could kill our own men. Zyron's glare silenced him. Then tell them to hold their breath. A metallic groan echoed through the deck. A door locking. Then another. And another. Sir, the technician whispered. He's sealing us in. A hollow realization settled over them. The ship wasn't locking Revenant out. He was locking them in with him. The power surged back for a brief second, just long enough for the security feed to flicker to life. A single image filled the screen. A guard station, blood pooling on the floor, the bodies of elite troopers but no visible wounds. No gunfire, no burns, just collapsed, their expressions frozen in terror. No sign of Revenant. A low voice whispered through the intercom. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Zyron's breath hitched. The lights cut out again. Something moved in the darkness. A scream, gunfire, then silence. The sound of boots, slow and deliberate, moving closer. Zyron turned sharply. Full lockdown. Do not engage him alone. Too late. A soldier standing near the entryway disappeared, yanked into the blackness by unseen hands. A wet, visceral snap followed. The remaining officers panicked. Some fired into the dark, bullets ricocheting uselessly against reinforced walls. Zyron grabbed the nearest soldier, voice a whisper. "Do you understand what's happening?" The soldier, shaking, nodded. "This is psychological warfare. He doesn't need to kill everyone. Just enough to make us destroy ourselves." The officer on the farthest console twitched, his breathing shallow, his grip on his weapon tightening. "He's in the vents," the officer muttered. "He's watching us." Another officer turned sharply. "Don't say that. Don't." The first officer opened fire, unloading his rifle into the ceiling in blind panic. Sparks and shrapnel rained down. Two more officers followed, firing wildly. Zyron didn't stop them. He couldn't. Revenant had already won this room. "Sir," a technician's voice cut through the madness. "We've tracked movement patterns. He's heading for the reactor core." Zyron's stomach twisted. "Deploy every remaining unit," he snapped. "We are not losing this ship." The Empire's forces were ruthless, disciplined, trained to counter any known threat. But what do you do when the threat isn't known? What do you do when the enemy understands your ship better than you do? The answer came in the form of a brutal ambush. The elite squad positioned near the reactor never had a chance. The first soldier fell before he even saw his attacker. The second turned, only to find nothing behind him. The third had time to scream before his body was yanked into the shadows. Zyron barely had time to process the failure before a new horror arrived. The security monitors flickered, revealing an image that froze every officer on the bridge. Revenant, standing alone in the reactor core, helmet in hand, his expression unreadable. He was waiting. Zyron knew a challenge when he saw one. A soldier turned to him, voice laced with desperation. "Orders, sir." Zyron hesitated for the first time. Why is he standing still? Why wasn't he running? Fighting? Killing? Unless... Zyron's eyes widened. He turned sharply. "Everyone off this ship. Now." The crew barely had time to react before the dreadnought lurched. A low, unnatural hum filled the air, reactor energy spiking. Revenant was controlling it. Zyron slammed his communicator. "Override the core. Shut it down." The response was immediate. "We can't. He locked us out." The intercom crackled again. Revenant's voice. "You never had control of this ship." Zyron's breath caught. "You thought you captured me," Revenant continued. "You thought this was a victory." A pause. "You have no idea what I am." The screen behind Zyron changed, Imperial databases, flashing with classified data breaches. A single transmission was sent to every Imperial command center. Every fleet, every officer, every ruling power of the Empire. A message. Not a demand, not a ransom, a warning. Humanity has arrived. The dreadnought's emergency sirens wailed. The hull shuddered as the overload hit critical mass. Zyron grabbed a nearby soldier, shoving him toward an escape pod. "Move, damn you!" A desperate scramble began. Officers, engineers, soldiers, all abandoning ship. The last thing Zyron saw before launching from the dreadnought was the image of Revenant, standing alone in the core. A ghost, a legend, a single human who brought the Empire's mightiest warship to its knees. And as the escape pod's thrusters fired, taking him away from the dying ship, Xiron realized something far, far worse than losing the dreadnought. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The escape pod tumbled through the void, shockwaves from the dreadnought's destruction rippling outward. Xiron's fingers dug into the seat's restraints as he watched the Empire's pride, Vale Zorith, become nothing more than a collapsing inferno against the darkness. No distress beacon, no final stand, just silence and ruin. The rest of the fleet would see the destruction soon. High Command would demand answers. But none of that mattered right now. The only thought consuming Xiron's mind was a simple, chilling truth. One human did this. A single operative. No reinforcements. No fleet. Just a man who walked onto an Empire-class dreadnought and tore it apart from the inside. A comlink crackled. One of the few surviving officers, his voice shaking. "Sir. Where is he?" Xiron didn't answer. The pod scanners detected other survivors. Escape craft drifting in the aftermath, some damaged, others barely functional. But among them, one was missing. There was no record of Revenant leaving the ship. No body found in the wreckage. And Xiron knew exactly what that meant. The shuttle's proximity alarms blared. A new vessel emerged from the debris, not Imperial. Smaller, sleek, designed for stealth. It had been waiting. It had been his way out. Revenant had never been trapped. The Empire was. Xiron stared at the ship through the viewport, knowing there was nothing he could do. A bright flare ignited from its thrusters, and it vanished into the abyss, leaving nothing but the wreckage of a warship and the ghosts of those who died aboard it. A few surviving Imperial ships converged, scanning for hostiles, but the enemy was already gone. No trace, no transmission. Just another impossibility to add to the legend. The comms operator on the nearest frigate hailed Xiron's pod. "Inquisitor, we're retrieving survivors." Orders. He had none. The damage was already done. The journey back to the fleet was silent. The bridge of the Imperial command vessel was eerily still as Xiron stepped aboard. Officers snapped to attention, but no one spoke. No one dared ask why an entire dreadnought had vanished from their ranks. A meeting was inevitable. The War Council assembled within the hour, holoprojectors flickering to life as high-ranking officials and military strategists filled the chamber. The room reeked of tension. Xiron stood at the center, eyes scanning the faces of the Empire's most powerful leaders. None of them looked pleased. Grand Strategist Varric leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Explain." Xiron met his gaze. The human was not a standard operative. Clearly, Varric's voice was cold. One soldier does not dismantle a warship. And yet, here we are. Silence. One of the warlords scoffed. "This is absurd. Even the most elite special forces require logistics, equipment, a support network. There is no conceivable way a single human did this alone." Xiron didn't argue. Instead, he gestured to the holo display. Data flickered, security logs, corrupted feeds, brief glimpses of shadowed movement. The evidence was undeniable. An older admiral narrowed his eyes. What was his objective? Fear. The room stilled. Xiron continued. This wasn't an assassination. It wasn't sabotage in the traditional sense. This was a demonstration. He wanted us to know exactly what he was capable of. He wanted us to see. A general scoffed. "And what? 'Cause paranoia? We rule thousands of systems. We crush rebellions before they can take root. This won't change anything." Xiron shook his head. "It already has." He tapped the holo display again. A transmission. The one Revenant had sent before the dreadnought fell. It had reached every Imperial channel. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't hidden. Humanity had declared itself. Not as victims. Not as a struggling, insignificant species. As something else entirely. The council members shifted uneasily. The implications were dangerous. The Empire had long considered humanity a minor annoyance. A scattered species with no centralized power, no real military infrastructure. But that assumption had just been shattered. If one of them could do this, what else were they capable of? Varric's expression darkened. "We need to contain this. Silence the message before it spreads. A strategist to his left spoke hesitantly. Sir, we can't. The message was relayed to multiple independent networks. We don't control all of them. The warlord who had scoffed earlier no longer looked amused. Then we eradicate them before they become a larger threat. That, Zyron said, would be the worst possible move. A ripple of tension passed through the room. You think we should do nothing? Zyron's voice was measured. I think if we act rashly, we give them exactly what they want. He took a slow breath. You think this was just one man, one operative? I don't. The holoprojector displayed intercepted data, human military operations that had vanished without explanation. Warships that never returned to their ports. Stations abandoned overnight. This is a pattern, Zyron said. He's not alone. There are others. And if we provoke them before we understand them, we won't be hunting them. His gaze swept the room. They'll be hunting us. Silence. For the first time in his career, Zyron saw something new in the War Council's eyes. Doubt. Fear. Humanity was no longer just an inconvenience. No longer just a primitive species on the fringes of their empire. They had prepared for this. They had planned for it. And today they had proven something terrifying. They were not prey. Varric exhaled slowly. Then what do you propose? Zyron hesitated. He had ideas, counter-strategies, operations to intercept potential threats, methods to mitigate damage before it spiraled out of control. But none of them were certain, because the truth was he didn't know what they were dealing with. For the first time, the Empire had encountered an enemy it couldn't predict. We find them, Zyron finally said. We learn their weaknesses. We don't engage until we understand. Or, Varric mused, until we have something that can match them. The implication was clear. If the Empire couldn't fight them conventionally, they would have to create something worse. Zyron didn't argue. He had seen what Revenant was capable of. If the Empire didn't adapt, they wouldn't just lose battles. They would lose everything. The council adjourned, but the weight in the room lingered. Officers departed in silence, strategists already formulating responses, warlords debating whether to strike first or wait. Zyron remained behind, staring at the last image frozen on the holoscreen. The wreckage of the dreadnought, a monument to arrogance, a symbol of everything they thought they understood and how wrong they had been. His fingers tightened into a fist. Revenant was out there, watching, and next time the Empire wouldn't be caught off guard. At least that's what they told themselves. The Imperial fleet mobilized within hours, warships stretching across the void, engines burning like dying stars against the abyss. Orders flowed in sharp, efficient sequences, patrols doubled, border stations reinforced, communications locked under tighter encryption. High Command wasn't taking any risks, but deep within the Empire's core systems, beyond the noise of military movements and political calculations, something else was happening. A single chamber, dark and silent, buried beneath the capital world's surface. No guards, no witnesses, just a room designed to hold one thing. The prisoner sat motionless, bound by grav restraints that locked his limbs in place. His head was lowered, expression unreadable, the dim lighting casting shadows across his form. They hadn't broken him. Interrogations had failed. Psychological warfare had yielded nothing. The finest mind readers in the Empire had stepped into that cell and walked out shaken, unable to extract a single useful piece of information. They didn't know what to do with him. The door slid open, and Zyron entered, his boots silent against the floor. He dismissed the two silent observers in the corner. He didn't need them. They weren't here to understand. He stood across from the human, studying him the way a predator sizes up an unfamiliar rival. Revenant remained still. Zyron finally spoke. You should be dead. The human lifted his gaze, and for the first time, Zyron felt something unsettling. A sensation he couldn't quite define. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Something deeper. Revenant's voice was quiet. You're not the first to think that. The silence stretched between them, a contest neither was willing to lose. Zyron pulled up the holo display, letting data flicker into the air between them. The wreckage of the Vale Zorith, transmissions intercepted from panicked Imperial commanders, reports of entire shadow fleets vanishing without a trace. "You knew we would capture you," Xiron said. "You planned for it." Revenant didn't deny it. "Why?" A slow breath. "Because fear only works if you let them see the monster up close." Xiron didn't flinch, but he understood the message clearly. Revenant wanted them to know what he was capable of. What his people were capable of. Xiron tapped another sequence on the holo display. The recording played Revenant's own message, the one that had spread through Imperial channels before the dreadnought had fallen. "You were warned. 10 years ago, your empire took what didn't belong to you. You thought we would break. You thought we would scatter. You were wrong. No more colonies burning. No more cities falling. This is where it ends. We are not prey. We are not weak. And now we are hunting you." The recording faded, but its weight lingered. Xiron watched the human carefully. There was no desperation in his expression. No hint of a man who had made a final, reckless stand. This wasn't over. Xiron exhaled slowly. "You think this is a game of fear. You think if you show us enough destruction, we'll retreat." Revenant tilted his head slightly. "You're close, but not quite." Xiron leaned forward. "Then tell me what this really is." Revenant's voice was quiet, but it carried something heavy. Absolute certainty. A demonstration. The holo display flickered again, and for the first time Xiron saw something new. A transmission heavily encrypted, intercepted just minutes ago. Not from the Empire. From the outside. It wasn't a distress signal. It was a countdown. Xiron's blood ran cold. The realization hit him all at once. Revenant wasn't alone. He never had been. And the only reason he had let himself be captured was because it kept the Empire's eyes on him, while something else was already in motion. Xiron snapped up his comms. "I need immediate fleet status." Too late. The warning klaxons erupted through the station. Tactical displays across the Empire's core systems flared with new alerts. Unidentified warships emerging from subspace, hitting supply routes, disabling communication relays. Not random strikes. Coordinated. Precise. The cell's lighting flickered as the entire station trembled. Systems were failing. Xiron turned back to Revenant. The human smiled. "This was never about me," Revenant said. "You thought I was the problem." He leaned forward, and for the first time Xiron felt something he had never once associated with humans. Pity. Revenant's voice was barely a whisper. "You never saw the others coming. The lights failed. The alarms died. And the war truly began."